Welcome to Forward Community Church Children's Ministries. I'm so glad you're here with us today for Sunday morning children's church. We've been learning about God's attributes. In the past 2 weeks, we've looked at how God is almighty. He has all the strength in the universe. He can do anything. And we've looked at how God is the Alpha and the Omega. He's the beginning and the end. He was there before everything, and He'll be here after everything. Well, today we're going to talk about how God is awesome. In the book of Exodus, we see at the beginning how God's people, the Israelites, have been in Egypt for 300 years. In our Wednesday night study, we're almost to this part of the Bible, so we'll be looking at this again soon. After 300 years, the Egyptians had enslaved the Israelites. They wanted them to do lots of work. They were treating them very poorly, just oppressing them a lot. So they cried out to God and asked God to help them. So God sent them a person to help. He sent them Moses, who would deliver them from the Egyptians. God told Moses to go to Pharaoh and to tell him to let his people go. My people need to go free. Just let them go and we'll leave you alone. But Pharaoh wouldn't do it. He wouldn't listen to Moses. He wouldn't listen to God. And so God had to send some plagues, some diseases and afflictions on the people of Egypt in order to show His power, to make them let His people go. Pharaoh was a king, basically. It's pretty much another word for king, and he was a very proud man. He was the ruler over the most powerful kingdom on the earth at the time. He thought that he had it all together. His people were the best. And why would he listen to this group of slaves and let them go? He wanted his workers. God needed to show Pharaoh and Pharaoh's people that he was more powerful than their gods, than them. Remember, our story today is about God being awesome. And He used these things to show His people, the Israelites, and Pharaoh how awesome He was. So let's kind of look at these plagues that God brought against Egypt. There were 10 of them. Before each one of these plagues, God would always send Moses to Pharaoh and give him a chance to repent of his sin and to let the Israelites go. And each time Pharaoh would harden his heart and would refuse. Sometimes he would promise to let them go, and then he wouldn't do it. He'd harden his heart again. So God started sending these plagues one by one. And the first one, He sent Moses and Aaron down to the river, and He told him to strike the water. And when he did, the river Nile turned to blood. The whole thing turned to blood. Can you imagine if all of your drinking water turned to blood and you didn't have anything to drink? You didn't have anything to wash with? That'd be a really bad place to be. And that's where the Egyptians were. There also was a very important significance with this, that the Egyptians worshipped the river Nile. It was one of their gods. For God to strike the Nile was showing that He was more important than it. After this, God brought frogs, thousands and thousands and thousands of frogs out of the river, and they went into the houses. They jumped all over everywhere. Can you imagine crawling in your bed and there's frogs in your bed? Ugh, that'd be horrible. But that's what God did to the Egyptians. Pharaoh still refused to let the people of Israel go. So God brought gnats or lice or mosquitoes. We're not sure exactly what it was, but they swarmed all over the people. They bit them, they annoyed them. They couldn't open their mouth without them flying in. God finally took these away because they were just driving the Egyptians crazy. Pharaoh promised to let his people go, didn't do it. Then God brought a plague of flies. Flies swarmed everywhere. Now, the Egyptians worshipped a god of the flies, Lord of the flies. At this point, God began to make a difference, a change in the way these plagues were brought. The flies only went to the Egyptians' homes. They did not go to the Israelites' homes. The Israelites' homes were free of flies, yet the Egyptians' homes were just swarmed with them. Moses went back to Pharaoh and he said, "Let my people go." And Pharaoh said, "Nope." So God was probably like, "You're not going to let my people go? Okay, here's another thing. And it's going to just get steadily worse." And God caused the death of all of the Egyptian cattle. They died in the field. The farmers got up the next day, went out to take care of their horses and their cows and their sheep and their goats, and they're dead out in the field. Their milk, gone. Their meat, gone. The Egyptians were really starting to suffer. Their food supply was hit hard. The next plague that God sent was against the Egyptians' bodies themselves. He sent boils or sores that attacked their bodies, that were all over them, in their hair, on their skin. They couldn't lay down and sleep because it was too painful. They must have been just in extreme agony. I'm sure the Egyptian people were hoping that Pharaoh would just let these people go. But yet Pharaoh still hardened his heart and not give in to God, even though God was showing his awesome power through all of this. Again, almost all of these plagues correspond to a god of the Egyptians. God was specifically targeting the things that the Egyptians worshipped, and he was saying, I'm more powerful than these things are. Frogs, god of the frogs. I'm more powerful than that God. The next plague, God says, okay, your cattle are all dead. You have sores on your body. Now I'm going to destroy more of your food. So God brought a big storm with thunder, and it hailed. And the hail had fire in it. And it destroyed all of the crops, all the wheat, all the crops of the Egyptians were just killed out in the field. So now they have no animals to eat, they have no crops to eat, and they have sores. The Egyptian people are really getting in trouble here. You would think now, if Pharaoh was a good leader, that he would have just let the people go. Get these people out of here, they're causing too much trouble. But God still had other plans, and Pharaoh hardened his heart. God brought up a plague, the plague of locusts. Grasshoppers swarmed over the land. Anything green that had survived the hail was now eaten down to the roots. The grasshoppers just ate all of it. Grasshoppers everywhere. Now there really was no food for the Egyptians to eat, and there wouldn't be any food for a long time. God then decided to bring 2 more plagues. Next to the last one, he decided to bring darkness in the daytime for 3 days straight. Again, God placed a difference between the Egyptians and between his people. In the Egyptians' home, it was complete, utter darkness. No light at all. You couldn't see your hand in front of your face. You couldn't see anything. You didn't dare move about because you'd run into things. Even if they lit a light, it would not put out any light. But in the Israelites' homes, they still had light. They could see what they were doing. God took care of his people, and he was showing how awesome he was and punishing the Egyptians for not letting his people go. And then finally, the last and worst plague of all. God warned the children of Israel to take special precautions. He told them to sacrifice a lamb and to take the blood and to put it over the doorpost of their door. This is where Passover comes from. This is Easter time. This is looking at Jesus and what he would do for us. Jesus was the lamb that saved his people. The Israelites killed the lamb and they ate it and they put the blood above the door, and the Egyptians didn't. That night, God sent a destroying angel. In any house that did not have the blood above the doorway, the angel went in and he killed the firstborn son of that house. All the firstborn sons of the Egyptians died, and yet all the firstborn sons of the Israelites were fine. God protected them. This is the Passover. God passed over the land of Egypt, destroyed the Egyptians, and spared the Israelites. One definition of awesome is inspiring awe or amazement. Really, when you get right down to it, God is probably the only thing that really inspires awe or amazement. God used these plagues to show the people of Egypt and the people of Israel that he can do things that we can't. After the Israelites were safely out of Egypt and on their way to the promised land, they remembered how God had delivered them, all the things that he had done, and they wrote a song that they sang to God, and they recorded it in the Bible in Exodus chapter 15. And verse 11 of that song is our verse for the day. It says, "Who is like you, O Lord, among the gods? Who is like you, glorious in holiness, fearful in praises, doing wonders?" God made a point through all of these plagues, as I've said, to show his power over the Egyptian gods. The Egyptians, you'll see that they had a lot of gods. They worshiped the god of the water, the sun, flies, frogs, many other things. They had gods that they worshiped. God chose these specific plagues to show that he was more powerful than those gods. He wanted to show how much greater he was than those things. You know, today we maybe don't have as many actual physical idols that we worship, but in society we have a lot of gods that we worship. Maybe we worship money or popularity, how many likes you can get on social media. Some people worship science or technology. Some people worship society. That's their God. I believe God still comes to us and he offers us a choice. We can give up those gods, those false gods in our lives, or he can come into our lives and he can show that he is more powerful. He can send plagues today into our lives to show that he is more important and more powerful. Pharaoh hardened his heart, and it took 10 times of God sending plagues to show that he was more powerful than all the things that he worshipped in his life. So if God's telling us to do or not do something, we should listen to him before he brings some kind of judgment into our life, or we bring some kind of judgment into our life by doing or not doing what he's telling us to do. For our activity today, we have some pages with finger puppets about the 10 plagues. Before you cut them out, you need to color them first. For example, this is the locusts, where they came and ate all of the green grass and the crops. And this is the lice. She's got lice all over her hair, itching. On this one, it had the hail, but it had no fire on it. So you need to draw your own fire and color it. And then we have the cattle that died. And this is the last one, the death of the eldest son. So this is the river Nile, and God turned the river into blood, and all the fish died in the river. This is where all the frogs came out and got in their houses and got all over everywhere. Here they had boils and sores all over their body. This one, there were no flies yet. You have to draw the flies all around everywhere. The last one on our sheet is darkness. God sent darkness all over the land of Egypt, and they couldn't see anything. So you need to cut them out and then make a loop and tape them. After you tape them together, then you can put them on your fingers, and it can help you remember the 10 plagues of Egypt. So we have water into blood, frogs, lice, flies, cattle dying, sores on the people, hail with fire, locusts, darkness, and finally death of the firstborn. In the description below, we'll put a link where you can get to the pages that you can print these off and color them and cut them out yourself. Don't forget to like and subscribe to this YouTube channel so you can see when our church puts out more videos. Thank you for watching. Hope you guys have a great day, and God bless you. See you all next time.